Jim Caballero, and I'm a member of the CORE Steering Committee and a proud member of the Chicago Teachers Union. On behalf of CORE, I welcome all of you, and we're very excited to be co-hosting this event with Lois Weiner. Before I actually introduce our guests, though, I want to point out that Julie Fain has petitions for more than a score. So at some time tonight, if maybe you can sign the petitions so we can help to fight against this crazy standardized testing that's going on in our city. So now to introduce our guests here. Lois Weiner brings to her wide-ranging scholarship on urban teaching and teacher unionism first-hand experience as a classroom teacher and union officer. She worked for 15 years in public schools in California, suburbs of New York, and New York City itself, all the while being a union activist. After completing her doctoral work at Harvard Graduate School of Education, she became a researcher and teacher educator in the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education at New Jersey City University. Her first book, Preparing Teachers for Urban School, was honored by the American Educational Research Association for its contribution to research on teacher education. To bring her research to a wider audience, Dr. Weiner wrote Urban Teaching, The Essentials. Urban teaching has been called a classic and is used in many programs of teacher education throughout the U.S. and Canada. In addition to dozens of articles and book chapters on teacher unions, she co-edited a collection of essays with Mary Compton, past president of Europe's largest teachers union, called The Global Assault on Teaching, Teachers, and Their Unions, Stories for Resistance. With contributions by researchers and teachers worldwide, the book describes neoliberalism's global project to transform education in the interests of transnational corporations and the role of teachers' unions in resisting. Her newest book, The Future of Our Schools, Teachers' Unions and Social Justice, published by Haymarket Press, has been received enthusiastically by teacher activists and scholars alike. I know I have definitely. Drawing on her knowledge of educational reform, teaching, and labor organizing, she explains how and why teachers should make their unions more like social movements, developing mutually respectful relationships with parents, students, and community activists. It is my honor and my pleasure to introduce Lois Weiner.
Can you hear me if I sit?
Yes.
In the back too? Can you hear me? Okay, I prefer that. Okay, I will. I taught classes in the auditorium. I first want to thank you for the invitation to talk with you this evening. Most of all, I want to start by thanking you for the work you are doing in your union and outside classrooms to save public education in Chicago. I know how tough a day of city teaching can be. It's great that you are here, and I want you to give yourselves a huge shout out for coming together tonight. Tonight, I want to share thoughts with you that draw on my book, my new book, The Future of Our Schools. I'm not going to summarize what I say in the book. I hope you will read it, buy it, and read it if you have not already. But in the next 25 minutes, I'm going to suggest what I think you've done already and what lies ahead in Chicago and for defenders of public education nationally and internationally. Then I hope we will have a pointed discussion with one another. The first thing I want to say is, you done good. The strike and the contract were an important beachhead in the struggle against a global project that will, if we permit it to go unchallenged, ruin the dreams and opportunities for millions and millions of children throughout the globe. Teachers around the world watched your strike anxiously. They were thrilled at your courage and your success. They have read and learned from CTU's vision for the schools Chicago students deserve. Bravo and brava. Your actions contrast with the paternalistic, authoritarian practices of CPS and the political and business elites that control education in this country and throughout the world. You have helped to create a burgeoning social movement to defend public education. As has been shown by the turnout in meetings CPS has called to defend its indefensible school closings. You have shown what empowering teachers, parents, students, and community to take ownership of the schools looks like, in contrast to policies that do harm in the guise of putting children first. But it's essential to view Chicago's situation within the big picture. Not just Illinois, not just the U.S., but the entire world. What you are experiencing in Chicago is an iteration of a project that has been planned and executed for decades. And I would say that Chicago was the home of the first comprehensive master plan of the neoliberal project in this country. We saw aspects of it in other cities for many years before, but it was in Chicago that we saw the first implementation comprehensively of this plan. This plan is driven by the desires of transnational corporations to remake the workforce and economies globally. Obviously, this is a huge subject. I like to say I have so much to say I could write a book about it, so I did. It's not available for sale, but I do have some flyers. The book is published by Palgrave, not as good at promoting it as Haymarket, I have to add. But I do have some flyers, and I obviously in this time I can't explain everything that I do in the book. But we do have to be aware that though it may seem that many policies like closing schools that have low test scores are irrational or just ignorant, that's not the case. Politicians' lack of knowledge about education and their animus towards teachers are certainly factors, but there is a far more onerous, far more chilling agenda that drives the collection of policies you have seen in Chicago. At the same time, it is important that we always introduce criticisms of these current reforms by acknowledging the historic reality of unequal schooling in this country. This is both morally right and politically essential at this moment. For this acknowledgement undercuts the persuasiveness of policies that increase inequality for the vast majority of children in the name of equalizing opportunity. Now, sometimes I am told that such a vast, well-organized project, such as the one that I described, could not exist without the American public knowing more about it. Sometimes people say, this sounds like a conspiracy. My answer is this: conspiracies are by definition secret. This is no secret. The global project to transform education has been quite public for decades, while we in the global north have been wearing blinders. Evidence about the real aims and actual effects of free market reforms have been available for many years if we looked in the right places. Not in educational journals, not in the New York Times, not in the popular media, but at prospectuses from banks and corporations developing new products for the educational market, in reports from the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, and in research by scholars in the rest of the world, most notably Latin America, where this project was first imposed. What we would have learned had we looked was that for wealthy, powerful elites who control business, media, and government, public expenditures on educating workers beyond the skill level needed for low-paying jobs is wasted. Since most jobs being created in the world today, including the U.S., require no more than an 8th grade education, you all know that, right? That's Department of Labor statistics. Think of Walmart's associates. Only a handful of people need to acquire the sophisticated thinking and skills to manage and control the world's productive resources. Therefore, this train of thought goes, minimally educated workers need only minimally educated teachers. Oversight of lowered expectations for educational outcomes can be achieved through use of standardized testing. Therefore, a well-educated and well-paid teaching force is thought to be a waste of scarce public money. It's all in World Bank documents. Their goals are to make public education a free market open to entrepreneurs, create a revolving door of minimally trained teachers, reduce the curriculum to basic math and literacy content that workers will need to compete for low-paid jobs with workers elsewhere in the world, control teachers and students with standardized testing, and weaken public oversight by breaking up school systems and replacing them with privately operated schools and school networks. Philadelphia has dissolved its school system. The biggest impediment to their carrying out their plan is teachers and teachers' unions. Our enemies understand the potential of unions, and it is for this reason that the unions, teachers' unions, have been the target of such a vicious propaganda campaign. I've done a lot of traveling in the last couple of years, and it is remarkable when you go from one city to the other how you have seen in the press about, you see in the press these exposés of teachers abusing kids, of teachers bilking the public, of scandals among special education teachers. Stephen Brill's piece in the New Yorker, the same thing has gone on in Los Angeles. It's not an accident. It is absolutely not an accident. This is a publicity campaign that has been orchestrated by right-wing think tanks. The significance of your accomplishment here in Chicago, if I may use the vernacular, is that you have foiled the perps in the conduct of their crime. You have shown what can happen when we mobilize teachers on behalf of social justice and their students' well-being, when we democratize the union, when we reach out to parents and students, listening to what they say, regarding them as equal partners from whom we can and we should learn. The project I describe in my new book, Creating Social Movement Teachers Unions, is just one aspect of generating a new social movement to defend public education. This movement will require respectful, authentic alliances with parents and community, fighting on issues other than schooling. To make this happen, the conversation in the unions needs to focus more and more on our vision for public education and our pedagogy. Because of our enemies' ideological and political strength, we must open up to the public discussions that were at one time viewed solely in terms of collective bargaining, contract language, and teachers' professional rights. Foremost in our thinking and organizing must be the question, what are my moral and professional responsibilities to the children entrusted in my care? And how do I bring this to the public? There is no single way to teach that works best for all children. We need a respectful discussion among teachers, researchers, parents, citizens, and community about what good teaching looks like and what kind of schools we want and need in a democratic society. At the same time, we need to put this discussion in an economic and political context. Our society has to support teachers in schools with the conditions that allow all children to learn. Hungry, homeless children cannot learn as well-fed children who have a warm bed and a quiet place to read. In these discussions with parents and community, we have to be sensitive to the fact that our opponents exploit a reality that is mainly of their making, but they exploit it. Poor people have, in the majority, received low-quality public services, not just in education, across the board. In education, this has translated into the fact that schools serving poor communities of color have too often provided students with a quality of education we would not permit our own children to have. While teachers are not responsible for the constellation of factors that create and support this inequality, they need to grapple with how to win parent support in light of this reality, especially when there are racial, class, and language divisions between teachers and the community. In this process, I think we have to rely on teachers who are from and live in communities of color for guidance and information. They are a valuable resource we must protect and use wisely. I want to conclude my remarks briefly discussing what I see as the implications of your work in Chicago. In doing so, I should emphasize that Chicago's experience cannot be a template that can be delivered to Detroit or Newark or Miami or Boston. Chicago, for instance, saw many years of parent and community organizing that other cities have not. The CTU had a union structure that was more democratic and more fluid than what exists in most other cities. Chicago never had the punishing rupture between teachers and community that Newark and New York City, for instance, experienced in the 60s. So what lessons does your struggle give us? What lessons are there from this struggle? You have shown us what is possible when teachers who believe in social justice have the courage and intelligence to transform their union and commit its resources and power to working as part of a movement to defend the promise of public education. That is the reason you are so dangerous to our opponents. And that is the reason they will attempt to crush you. They have learned from your success and are scrutinizing your weaknesses. We must do the same with a ruthless objectivity. They bring money and power that it buys. We bring the strength of democracy and the power that comes from struggling for the ideals of justice, freedom, and human liberation. Our ideals and collective strength show us possibilities that our opponents cannot see. And so now, let's talk about possibilities in Chicago. What do we need to do, and how are we going to do it? Thank you.
Open it up for questions, and the way we're going to work this is we're going to take maybe 3 questions or comments. Thank you. Comments, questions, issues people want to raise, and then we'll let Lois respond to those, and then we'll take another clump. So we'll start with you. Can you speak really loudly so that the people in the back can hear your question?
I'm a displaced teacher. I lost my position last June. But one of the best things that happened to me this year is that I am sent to a different school every 2 weeks. And it's been so amazing to see the inequality of the schools that I've been going to. This week I've been to a neighborhood school on the north side. It has everything. 2 weeks ago I went to a magnet school on the south side. They were begging for an art teacher, a music teacher, and a gym teacher. And the art sub had nothing. He kept asking for material, nothing to work with the students. I brought stuff from what I had at home, whereas the art teacher at this school had everything, and I was just so impressed with it. And so it really gave me an insight of seeing all the things that are happening in our school. I've heard about it, but never actually have seen it with my own eyes. So I can see why they're using these excuses. Well, they're not doing anything. They don't have any resources. Therefore, let's close the school. Now, both schools are level 1 schools. So in spite of the fact that this other school has no resources, they have managed to keep their school at level 1. So I just thought